It's 10 years today since Kenya promulgated a new constitution, a document that has been touted as one of the most progressive constitutions ever in the world. It took the country more than 20 years and 2 referendums to arrive at the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And the drafters and the proponent of that charter had one thing in mind: a liberal democracy where independent institutions are the beacons of hope, social justice, and equity. Well, 10 years later, there is little and sometimes nothing to write home about those societal norms. 10 years later, Kenya has lost more money in corruption than ever, and the suspects are the high and mighty. Many of them still hold high public offices, despite the provision of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. 10 years later, tens of civilians continue to disappear mysteriously in the hands of law enforcement agents. Social justice and human rights are still a mirage for people, the very same people who yearned for the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, social justice, and the rule of law. Values that are well enumerated in Chapter 2 and 4 of the Supreme document. 10 years later, gender parity is still a mirage. Even Parliament today is illegally constituted. I repeat, even Parliament is illegally constituted. 2/3 gender rule remains a project, albeit in progress, in which one gender runs roughshod against the other in the name of politics. Even the current cabinet only attained the 2/3 gender rule threshold in March this year when Betty Maina joined the top executive organ. 10 years later, 2 arms of government have been reduced to just that, arms of government. Arms that only work for and as per the prescription of the executive. The judiciary has been at loggerheads with the executive. The former often claims that it is being curtailed for sticking to the rule of law, the latter accusing the former of being partisan. Parliament is the latest victim of intrusion and control. Freedom of association and expression has seen many lawmakers lose their positions in committees in both houses. 10 years later, equitable national cake is not a right but a privilege that must be earned the hard way. Senators must viciously fight for the share of revenue that goes to their counties. And that fight is not fair, neither is it square. Outside forces callously compromise the upper house to vote away from the interest, their own interest, and that of the voters. Indeed, the supreme law of the land that Kenyans bequeathed themselves 10 years ago has remained largely a document that the top politicians now want amended pronto, not because it failed to stop human rights violations, but because it does not expand the political space. Will it be a new decade and a new constitution? If so, Mr. President and your friend, the former Prime Minister, please, and I repeat, please, let the next 1 decade be a constitutionalism realization moment rather than another political whims entitlement phase for Kenya. After all, power to the people.